Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, November 12th, 2022, and we are less than 1 week from the 2022 midterm elections, and it looks like the Democratic Party is on track to maintain Senate control, and not only maintain Senate control, but potentially have a pickup across the United States. As it stands today, the Democratic Party currently has 49 seats called for them in the U.S. Senate. This includes a number of competitive races from New Hampshire to Pennsylvania to Colorado to Arizona, with two outstanding races in Nevada and Georgia. These two states are ones that are going to be decided over the next few days in Nevada and then over the next month in Georgia. Georgia's heading off into a runoff election between Raphael Warnock and Herschel Walker. That will take place in December this year instead of last year's election in January of 2021. Instead, they've altered the timeline to a point where it'll now be December 6th, about a month ahead of where it normally would have been under the previous election rules. Now, looking at where we are, we have about 95% of the vote in from the state of Nevada. Adam Laxalt currently leads Catherine Cortez Masto, the Democrat, by about 0.1%, 48.5 to 48.4. It's exceptionally close, and it looks like Democrats are, in fact, on track to win this race. Adam Laxalt had started out with a very tremendous lead. In fact, when we look at the individual results, you can see as it trickles in over time, the amount of vote, or I guess it's blurred out here, but what you will find is that there was a much more significant lead for the GOP earlier on. However, as the votes started to pour in, as we started to see more and more results come in, Catherine Cortez Masto began to take batches in at a 60 to 40 rate, 70 to 30 rate, to a point where now, as we expect the final 5% to come in, Catherine Cortez Masto is on track for victory. So how did this exactly happen? How do we come to a point where the narrowest Senate majority possible in U.S. politics still could not be overcome by the Republican Party? And it comes down to this general point and this general conclusion following the 2022 midterms that it was, in fact, not a red wave. And what I mean by that is it was 1,000% a neutral year, if not a beneficial year for Democrats. Simply put, the polls were wrong. And wrong in a way that we had never really seen them wrong before, in the sense that they are showing Democrats doing significantly worse than they actually ended up doing on election night. And looking at our Senate map, the way that this was extremely strategic for the Democratic Party, it relied on a lot of moving parts. It relied on Democrats being able to win in regions of the country that they otherwise did not previously win in. For instance, in 2016, the last time we had this Senate map up, we can actually pull it up with our past elections. The state of Arizona was a solid GOP state, as was the state of Georgia. In Georgia, Johnny Isakson won by 14 points in this exact seat that Raphael Warnock is now heading into a runoff election. Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania won his race by 1.4%. New Hampshire was won by the Democrats by just 0.1%. Colorado was won by just 5.7%. Ohio was won by the GOP by 21 percentage points. And in Arizona, John McCain won by 13 points. So what we found in these states, in a number of the competitive states from the last election cycle in which this class of Senate seats were up, the Republicans performed significantly better. But a lot has changed between now and the 2022 midterms. Arizona became a pretty solid blue state. It required Mark Kelly to win what looks like to be potentially a 6-point margin of victory. The numbers are, quite frankly, getting better for Mark Kelly. This was called today, but we practically knew from election night when Maricopa County started sending in batches that showed Mark Kelly significantly ahead of Blake Masters, we realized that it wouldn't be possible for Democrats to lose this race. Democrats also did exceptionally well in Ohio, where they lost this race by 6 points, which seems at the surface level like a bad call, but I just showed you it was previously won by the last Republican by 21 points. You look at Georgia, was previously won by 14 points. Raphael Warnock, the Democrat, actually pulls ahead by less than a point. If it was to be in a traditional state, the Democrats, in fact, would have won this race outright. But now it's heading into a runoff where Warnock and Walker are going to have to make up the margin. They're going to have to get to 50% no matter what. No matter what happens in that runoff, at least one candidate will be past that 50% mark. In New Hampshire, the Democrats won that race by 10 percentage points. It's crazy to think about, but a 10-point race, and one that was decided previously by 0.1%. So when you look across the country, the Democratic Party started out in these U.S. Senate elections with an outright advantage. And they started out with the advantage because they were the incumbents. That's typically how congressional races work. About 90% of House incumbents are reelected routinely every 2 years. In the Senate, it's a bit trickier. You're talking sometimes around 80 to 90%, but still a pretty successful rate. And it was one that told us that on the surface level, based off of incumbency, based off of who is coming in with the advantage, It is the Democrats. It also came down to a point of Republicans having such unfortunate candidates across this country. For instance, in the state of Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz was the Republican nominee. Imagine telling yourself that 2 years ago, that the TV personality Dr. Oz would be the Republican nominee for Senate in such what was expected to be, at least, a beneficial year for the GOP. The Republicans were supposed to dominate, and the best they could come up with was Dr. Oz. It doesn't end there. They couldn't field a strong candidate in New Hampshire. Don Bolduc had to take the reins and win that primary, narrowly, might I add, went on to lose by 10 points. J.D. Vance was a significantly lackluster candidate in Ohio and was expected to be a red wave, which was a better year, quite frankly, than 2020. J.D. Vance only won Ohio by 6. Trump won it by 8 in both 2016 and 2020. Ron Johnson won his race by just a single point, 1 percentage point in a race that should have been pretty solid for the GOP. Looking at Georgia, Herschel Walker, a football player, someone who has no political experience whatsoever, was supposedly going to be this ever-strong, amazing GOP candidate that ended up falling through. You look at the state of Arizona. Blake Masters came out of absolutely nowhere, defeated a statewide elected official who would have come in with some type of electoral experience, would have come in with the ability and the history of winning in a blue wave year. Mark Brnovich was potentially going to be the Republican nominee for Senate in Arizona, was pushed back by the Trump crowd, lost his nomination, but guess what? He won in 2018 when Kyrsten Sinema and the Democrats took control of Arizona. So when you think about that, you had someone in Arizona, you had someone in New Hampshire, you had people all across the country, Pennsylvania, Georgia, right? You had better candidates. Ohio makes a mention because should J.D. Vance have been a better candidate, the Republican Party would not have needed to take money away from New Hampshire and Arizona and siphon $28 million from other competitive races back into Ohio because they feared about losing it. This is a Trump plus 8 state that should have never been considered to be, in any reality, a lost cause. And while GOP candidate quality played a major factor into why candidates were losing these races, I would also point to Nevada as an instance and showing of how Democrats are still doing well, despite Republicans in some occasions having good candidates. Specifically in Nevada, Adam Laxalt really didn't have much baggage. I understand there were a lot of attacks that were used against him, but keep in mind this is the same guy who ran for governor 4 years ago. A lot of what has already been said was said previously, so it really didn't hit too much of a chord or strike a chord with many people when it came down to these scandals being re-litigated for the 2022 midterms. Again, it's the same thing that the Sisolak campaign used back in 2018. But it looks like he's going to lose. It looks like Catherine Cortez Masto is going to make up that margin, and with that, the Democrats maintain control of the Senate. We haven't called Nevada. It wouldn't make sense to because Adam Laxalt is ahead, but based off the numbers and the returns that we are seeing across the state, Adam Laxalt simply does not have the numbers to win the Senate race as of right now. That could change if all of a sudden the batches from urban areas start coming in 50-50, which would be a shock to us all. Then Adam Laxalt has a good chance at victory. But right now, based off of the amount of outstanding vote, about 5% of the electorate has still yet to be counted, with just a 1,000 vote lead for the Republican and consistent gains and gains and gains, we will find here that Cortez Masto is likely on track for victory. So, based off of where we are, if we are to put in the states that we know how they're going to go, we have Arizona going to Mark Kelly, Michael Bennet winning in Colorado, Marco Rubio winning in Florida. Toss-up in Georgia because it's heading to a runoff. Indiana went red. Iowa went red. Louisiana went red. Missouri, I'm just characterizing all the states that we know how they're going to go. North Carolina, red. Nevada, toss-up, but we'll get back to it. New Hampshire called for the Democrats. Ohio went to the Republicans. Fetterman wins the state of Pennsylvania, wins Washington, and Democrats lose the state of Wisconsin. What you find is that the odds, according to FiveThirtyEight, given the circumstances that we are in right now, Democrats have about a 75% chance of victory. For reference, in the last Senate forecast right before the election, Republicans had a 59% chance of victory. So it goes from 59, dips all the way down to 25. Guess what happens if Nevada goes blue? Well, Democrats have a near certainty because there is no other possibility. It is the Senate call, thus it would be a greater than 99% chance. But the stance in Georgia remains a toss-up. But the interesting thing here is that with all of the races that we have called, Democrats end up in a point where they're at 75 to 25. And it becomes very difficult to see how Republicans win control of the Senate. The House is still a very similar story to what we know. Republicans had this advantage. It was a 4-seat majority as well. But the fact is, the House has yet to be called. We don't know who's going to win control of the House. In fact, the New York Times has an amazing new adaptation for the website here, The Path to 218. tracking the remaining House races because, quite frankly, we don't know who's going to win control of the House, and that makes it very difficult for the Democrats and Republicans to proceed, but more so for the Republicans because they came in. You could see Kevin McCarthy about a year ago said that Republicans had the opportunity to pick up 60 seats. Well, when you drop a zero, it becomes more realistic. But it's because Republicans had done so well in 2010 and 2014 that 2022 was almost destined to be an exceptional year for the GOP. Well, not only was it not exceptional, it might have actually benefited the Democratic Party. This is the first midterm election since 1934 that the incumbent party has not lost a single legislative chamber across the country. In fact, they gained one trifectas across the country. This is the first midterm in 40 years that the Democrats or any incumbent president did not lose. I think with the exception of George W. Bush and Bill Clinton, the first one in 40 years, or I guess one of these, where the incumbent president did not lose more than 10 seats in the House. The Republicans had an exceptional opportunity. This will actually join one of the very few midterms where the Democrats or the incumbent party will actually be gaining seats in the Senate. 2018 was one of them, but beyond that, you could go back to maybe 2002, maybe 1998. I think the 2002 might have just been the House, but 2018 was one of those few exceptions where the Republican Party actually gained seats. But given the seats that we were dealt with, given the seats that we were working with, the Republicans should have absolutely ran this map across the board, should have won every single race, knowing our national environment. And looking at where we are today, it is becoming near certainty that Nevada is going blue. That less than 1,000 vote difference when all of the remaining vote is coming from urban areas, you start to see how the story gets painted, and you start to see how the Democrats are coming to a very, very realistic possibility at winning in Nevada. You look at Arizona, it's already been called. You look at Colorado, already been called. You look at Pennsylvania, that was a big one. Dr. Oz was supposed to win, and I'll take the heat. I incorrectly predicted Dr. Oz winning in Pennsylvania, but so did practically everybody else. FiveThirtyEight had Dr. Oz winning in Pennsylvania, right? When you look at a lot of other projections, the Cook Political Report had a toss-up, but Larry Sabato's crystal ball had Pennsylvania as red. Looking at my projection, sure, it was off, but I can't say that I always had it there. I had it with John Fetterman for months on end for nearly an entire year. But it was that last-minute surge that made me believe the Republicans would be on track for a solid victory across the country, and quite frankly, I've been let down. I've been let down by a pretty significant amount based off of where we are right now. Because these are the results. I thought that there would be a victory for Mark Kelly by 1 to 5 points. It's looking like it's going to be 6 points. I thought Oz would win by a point or two. He's losing by 4 to 5 points. I'm looking all across the nation, and the Republican Party did significantly worse than anybody expected, at least on the analysis side. Maybe some people did expect it, than most people expected them to do, because the Senate map was so exceptionally easy. You had states that were decided by the narrowest of margins in the 2020 election. Biden won Arizona by 0.2. Mark Kelly, the Democrat, wins by 6. Pennsylvania, John Fetterman, the Democrat, wins by 4 at least. Joe Biden won by 1 point. Even New Hampshire, Biden won here by 7.7%, and the polls said that the Republican would win here. You know what happened? Maggie Hassan won by 10. The polling misses across this country were so significant. They had Oz up by 2 in Pennsylvania. He lost by 4. Arizona had the polls down to a point. It's going to Mark Kelly by 6. New Hampshire is one of the worst cases of polling inaccuracies where you found that Don Bolduc, the Republican, pulled ahead on Election Day. Maggie Hassan won by 10. That is over a 10-point swing. And across the country, practically everywhere you look, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire, Arizona, Nevada, all saying the Republican Party would dominate in their respective races, losing or barely losing, barely winning for the case of Wisconsin. Tells you everything you need to know about polling accuracy. It is never 100% accurate, but our historical understanding that they always underestimate Republicans has now been entirely thrown out the window. Polling is broken, punditry is broken. That doesn't mean don't listen to sites like FiveThirtyEight or Cook Political Report or Sabato's Crystal Ball, but it means do understand that there have been inaccuracies now, established ones, over the past 6 years on both sides. And it means that there could be upsets in the future, and in some cases, as we are now reflecting on these past few races in the Senate, upsets that will also favor Democrats as we go into the next 2 years, tracking the 2024 presidential election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.